All right, well, we have a good crowd, so let's just jump in. As Chris said, my name is Clémence, and I help people write their memoirs and publish books about their family history. And family history means a little something different to everybody, so let's take a quick look at some examples. Okay, now my cursor isn't working. Okay, here we go. So here's a family tree. Family trees obviously are what we create when we work on genealogy projects. These, by the way, make excellent uh, things to bring to family reunions so cousins can see how they're related and whatnot. Another type of family history project is writing your memoir. It's a very different type than a genealogy project, but in my view, it's also a family history project because you have a lot of family history stories in memoirs. A book of correspondence. So, for instance, how many of you out there have stacks of letters from ancestors, from grandparents or parents or something like this you don't know what to do with? Scan them, match them up with some photos, and make a book out of it. It's a one correspondence, which, by the way, nobody writes anymore. Correspondence is a wonderful snapshot of a place and time, and makes a great book. Archiving is another kind of family history project. Even though it doesn't tell a story all by itself, you actually have to step in and help tell the story. Archiving is part of family history projects. And then a coffee table book that's more of a compilation of the family history. I call these family history books. Photographs, maps, genealogical documents, trees, narrative. These type of compilation books are the culmination of research and storytelling, and really a terrific way to pass on your family history. And the common thread in all these projects, whether it's genealogy or memoirs or archiving or even just plain old sorting and organizing, the common thread is storytelling. And whether you're actually doing the storytelling or the prep work to get the story out of the materials, everything you're doing is in the service of the stories. And when you think of genealogy as the skeleton of the family, right? And the pictures and documents is the flesh and blood of the body, where is the heart and soul? And that's the stories, that's the storytelling. And that's where the good stuff really is. And I love this quote by Ursula Le Guin. There have been great societies that did not use the wheel, but there have been no societies that did not tell stories. And that happens to be my view exactly. But there is a big problem. There are a bunch of myths or misconceptions about storytelling that keep us from doing it or that kind of sabotage our family history projects. So this is a card, a Hallmark card that I saw at Walgreens during the winter, and that kills me. Every time I read it, I laugh. I hope you can all see it. It's an old grandpop who's got his two grandkids, presumably his grandkids sitting next to him. And the pop is saying, and that, kids, is the story of my very first colonoscopy. And one of the grandkids looks like he was about to pass out, and the other one is just bored to tears. And so this illustrates kind of these misconceptions that keep us from doing the storytelling. The first one is this notion that people don't care. My kids, my grandkids, they don't care. They're not interested in these stories. Well, yes, I will grant you that rare is the 13-year-old who is interested in family history. Some of them are, but not a lot. And that's totally normal. It's totally normal as a kid or a teenager to be interested in yourself and your friends and what's going on today. But when they get older, when they have their own kids and grandkids, then they're going to care. They're going to care the way you care right now. And they're going to be stressed that their kids don't care, right? So maybe you'll be around to tell the stories and pass on the information, but if you're not, what are you going to do about it? Okay, the second myth that's out there is this notion that, oh, my life isn't that interesting. I didn't invent sliced bread. I didn't cure cancer. So I don't know that I really have stories that should be told. And, nothing could be further from the truth. First of all, our lives in and of themselves, I'm going to assume everybody on the Zoom call was born before the internet. If there are younger people on the call, welcome. But for those of us who were born before the internet, let alone cell phones and all that, our lives are like science fiction. It's just, how did we ever get any work done? How did we do research? How did we write a paper in college? So I think that kind of stuff is interesting. And the other reason that your life is interesting is because the people who are going to read it love you. It's that simple. And therefore it will be interesting to them. Now, if you believe these two first misconceptions, then the third one is perfectly logical. if you think that your grandkids don't care, and if you think your life interesting, then of course it makes sense that writing your memoirs or writing a book about your family history would be an ego trip. But nothing could be further from the truth. Writing your memoirs or producing a book about family history is a gift. It is a gift of love. And so what is that really? So in terms of storytelling, it's been a huge trend, whether it's your own story, even family stories. I mean, look at StoryCorps. If you don't know about StoryCorps, you should look it up. 500 million stories have been recorded so far. The Library of Congress has a project with the veterans, a project called Veterans Project, where they record the stories of veterans. And the Shoah Foundation records the stories of survivors of genocides. What do these people have in common? They are all non-famous people, right? The rich and famous hire really expensive ghostwriters and try and get on the New York Times bestseller list because it's part of their brand. That's who they are. That's how they make money. That's the public notion. That's not what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about our personal stories meant for our families, which you can do today with online printing. You can print 5 copies of a book, and it's not going to cost you $1 million. It's really pretty wonderful. I mean, now's the time to do this stuff. And when you think about storytelling in the context of estate planning versus legacy planning, estate planning, I mean, there's a big, big industry there to help you with all your assets, the house, the car, the stuff, the money, all that stuff that we've accumulated. There's, hopefully, maybe not, but hopefully you put together a will and that stuff's all squared away. But what about legacy plan? What is the plan to pass down everything that you've got up here? All the family stories, the family traditions, your set of your value system, your wisdom, your life experiences. How do we get that out and onto paper, onto video? So there are a lot of different ways to do it. I showed you some examples. And so the rest of the discussion today is going to be some how-to for how to get these stories onto paper, into a book, organized, and so on. All right. Oh, I forgot about this guy. So I was giving this presentation over the winter, and someone on the call said to me, "Your presentation is exactly what my father was talking about when he wrote his memoir." So this gentleman wrote about 50 pages or 100 pages on his life, and this was his preface. And she sent it to me, and she's allowed me to use it in this presentation. And he says he did it not. Can everybody read this? I'm just going to assume you can read it on your own, and I'll call out the important parts. He says he did it not because of an ego trip. He actually used the word ego trip. It's funny that he and I are using the same language. But someone in his family asked him to, which is unusual, but wonderful. And he said he regretted that his ancestors never left any written material that would have been informative to me or my family. So how many of you out there tonight would love to have 50 or 100 pages that one of your grandparents or great-grandparents wrote about their life, their everyday life, how they lived, what they thought, how they learned, their challenges, their joys? It would be wonderful to have that. So you have to, pay it forward, so to speak. The reason that we tackle family history projects is so that in 50 years or 100 years from now, those descendants will have access to your information. And I know I'm harping on this concept a little bit, but in those times when we get frustrated with the actual, the doing of the family history project, they're not always easy, they're not always fun. And so when you get frustrated, you have to come back to this notion of the storytelling and how important the story is. Anyway, and so the other thing that makes this particular example very meaningful is that his daughter, Kathy, was, he was able to write a note to her, a handwritten note, and personalize this document. And you can imagine how powerful and important this document is to her. I mean, it's probably one of her most prized possessions. I mean, she has a house, she has a car, she has things, but you can't buy something like this, right? All right, so let's get to the how-to portion of things. I get 3 kinds of comments from people other than around storytelling. And so the first one that we're going to discuss is this notion of these boxes of family stuff that we have and we don't know what to do with. Everybody out there have one? You can raise your hand, you cannot raise your hand. Even I have these boxes. I mean, these boxes are brutal. And the part of the problem with the boxes, other than not knowing what to do with them, is that what's inside them kind of terrifies us because we don't know, we've never been trained really on how to deal with preservation of materials, of the collection. So we're going to talk about that. And then I want my grandkids to know about their family and where they came from. This is what I would call genealogy projects. We'll go over some basic concepts in genealogy. All right. So does this look familiar? This is one of my boxes of family history stuff, correspondence, newspaper clippings, high school and college diplomas, articles, published articles, genealogy documents. And here's the kitty artwork. There's and trophies and medals that you get in school. I got a little trophy when I was in like 3rd grade for my swim team. And then I made a piece of kitty art to go with it, which, by the way, is collecting dust, which is one of the terrible problems with tchotchkes. And of course, photographs. We all have them coming out of our ears. Okay, so tackling these boxes is really a basic triage and organization project. And I'm going to give you a strategy for how to do it effectively. And I'm going to talk about it in context of photo organizing, but you can use the same strategy for organizing documents and even with dealing with the objects. So we're going to assume we're talking about photographs. And the first thing to do is gather all of it. And the reason you want to gather all of it is because you don't want to invest all this time into setting up your spare bedroom or your office as a gathering place for the materials, go through the trouble of opening all the boxes and organizing everything, filing it away, and then walking into the attic and realizing there are 3 more boxes that now you have to do the whole thing all over again and integrate both of the jobs you just did. So do it right the first time, get everything together. Here's a list of hiding places, right? The attics and closets and bedrooms and whatnot. One of the things that's not on here is, for anyone who's downsized, if you unloaded some of your family history boxes on your kids, now is the time to get it back. If you're going to do all this organizing, just do those boxes too. You're going to need a couple basic supplies. Post-it notes come in real handy when you want to remember something about a particular photo. We don't leave post-it notes on photos long-term, but short-term, they're real handy. Note cards when you're going to start making stacks of different categories of pictures. The note cards you put in between the stacks to keep them separated. A notebook to keep notes. So what's okay to do when you're going through all these old photos is to remember what's in the photo and to just to give that photo some consideration. What's not okay is to stop what you're doing, relive the whole memory, call your daughter to talk about it, and then move on to the next photo. It's going to take you half an hour per picture, and then you're never going to get out of this. So keep that notebook handy. If there's a photo there that reminds you of a story or something else, just jot down a note to come back to it later. The notebook's really kind of critical in this. Dental floss or a little craft spatula. The reason I listed that is because if you're really going to do all your organize all your photos, don't forget to grab the albums that are lying around, especially those albums that are kind of falling apart. At one point, those albums were very popular. Do you know the ones I mean? They're kind of sticky on the inside, and you would put you'd raise this sheet of thin plastic and put your photo, and it would kind of glue stick onto the page, and then you close the plastic sheet. So sometimes that glue disintegrates and the pictures fall out, but sometimes that glue turns into, it's hard as rock, and it's very hard to get the pictures out. But now is the time to get those pictures out of that album because the album is clearly deteriorating and it's not a good long-term storage space for those photos. And you're going to need storage containers. Part of this process is, did I meant say storage? I meant sorting. I'm sorry, sorting containers. It can be one of your extra boxes from Amazon. It can be a shoe box, whatever you want. It's just a place to temporarily put photos of different categories. So when you're opening a box and it's a box of old pictures, but mixed in with new pictures, somehow somebody threw in some new pictures in there too. Well, now that you're sorting, you put the old pictures in box 1, the new box 1, and the new pictures in box 2. You have to separate all this stuff. That's how you start going through it. And that's why you need a little bit of space to do this. People ask me if there's a special sauce in terms of organization. So when you really get down to breaking this stuff down and creating these different buckets of categories, how do you bring it all together? Do you do it thematically or chronologically? And unfortunately, the answer is whatever works best for you. I wish I could tell you there was a magic way to do it. It's just not how it goes. Even professional archivists who work in places like the HSP or the Library of Congress, they all look at a collection on a collection by collection basis before it's processed. Yes, chronological order is very popular. It's just intuitively, it makes sense to us, even if You can't perfectly identify what year this was taken of your great-grandmother. You know generally where it goes on the timeline. But if you're not someone who likes to search for things chronologically and you prefer to search for things thematically, then you should consider thematic organization. So if you want to put all your pictures of summer vacations down the shore in one box as a category, you should do that. If that is a meaningful category for you that will help you down the road, then don't feel like you are doing it wrong, like you're making some teacher is going to come running after you with a red pen and fail you on the test. That's just not, unfortunately, that's the type of thinking that will derail us from finishing these projects. The other thing to think about is how large and complex your collection is. That also influences the type of organizational structure you're going to have. All right, so you're staring at all these pictures, you have them all over the room. How do you figure out what goes where? So there's really 4 kind of categories, and we refer to them as the ABCs. An A is for album, but really that means the favorite photos you have, and whether they're in a frame or in an album or elsewhere, maybe even on your phone. Those are your favorites, and they're going to be a priority for digitizing and for archiving. And it's a really important category to think about because digitizing and archiving is expensive. Archival supplies are really expensive. Digitizing isn't cheap. If you do it yourself, it's relatively inexpensive, except it's a lot of time. And if you pay someone, it's just not inexpensive. And then storing it on the cloud isn't cheap either. So you want to really curate category A carefully. But I don't have an agenda to get you to throw things away. I'm not saying you should throw everything that's not category A away. Category B is for the things you want to keep, but that aren't as important to you, that aren't as critically important, that don't necessarily need to be digitized. And then we have our good old C for trash can. And I'll tell you, one of the things I see all the time is, do you remember the 80s and 90s and whatnot, and you could get free duplicates and free triplicates? So most of us still have those duplicates and triplicates. I don't know why, but that's just what happens. And so not only do you have like a blurry photo of the rhododendron one year that you took because it was blooming nicely, but you have 3 pictures of the blurry rhododendron. So first of all, I don't think you need 3 pictures of that. Maybe you don't even need 1 picture of it. But this is the time to go through all those leafs of photos and really triage and toss the ones you don't like or don't want, and set the A category aside. Bad photos, damaged photos. If you have a photograph you care about a lot and it's damaged, you can spend a little money to have it restored. Do you guys do that at the HSP? Do you do restoration, Chris?
We do not do restoration.
Okay. So I have other recommendations. If you want to restore a photo, there's a number, or other documents, there's a number of places here in town that will do that for you. Unknown photographs. By that, I mean photographs of ancestors, old photographs, and you're not really sure who it is. So this is one that's a little more controversial. It's really hard to throw away pictures of people who you know are ancestors, but you just don't know who they are. You feel really disloyal doing that. And you can take classes. I don't know if the HSP offers it, but you can take classes that teach you how to identify, down to the decade of when the photo was taken based on what people are wearing and based on the type of photographic print it is and things like this. So if you're a genealogist, you can narrow down, who in the tree might match up with the decade or the time that you've been able to identify in the photograph. So some people love that kind of detective work. Some people think it's a lot of fun. I personally don't. That is not something I would be prepared to do. So I say put the unknowns in the trash can. Hopefully, I haven't offended too many people out there, but don't feel too guilty about not working on those if you don't want to. The last category is S for stories. So maybe you do have a photograph that's damaged, or it's a blurry photograph, or it's just not a great photograph, but it's an important photo because it tells a story. Or it's the only photograph you have of somebody important, and you want to make sure that person is remembered and their story is remembered. So that bumps it automatically into an A category, and an entry in your notebook to remember to tell the story. So that is the basics of photo organizing. And again, you can do this with documents too. If you have a box full of genealogy research that someone did, or civic documents or ship manifests or whatever. It's the same concept. For objects, it's a little trickier because objects just are bigger and take more room, and you can't move all the objects. But many of the objects we have, especially the ones that aren't really worth anything, are things like souvenirs or tchotchkes, the objects that have a huge amount of sentimental value, but unfortunately are not made to last. A lot of these little objects are made of plastic. They've got glues in them that will deteriorate and disintegrate. So the best thing to do, in my view, is to photograph them, and dust them off, put them in nice lighting, snap a quick picture, and then write a little paragraph about why that object matters to you, where you got it, why it has sentimental value. Did you buy it on your honeymoon? Was it a gift from your mother-in-law? I don't know, whatever the story is. And then you can make a little book out of it. And that has a number of benefits, not the least of which it gives your kids something to remember the house they grew up in, if you do it for all the objects in your house. But it's a lovely way to kind of preserve the memory and the story of the object, even though the object is not long for this world. All right. So now that you've done all this organizing, which, by the way, is no small task, it's not something you're really just going to bang out in an afternoon if you have any real number of things. So be patient. So now what are you going to do? Now we move on to archiving. So we don't really talk about archiving in terms of personal collections, which is a shame because we do have personal collections. Your family history documents, those boxes of things that you have, it is a collection. It is your family history collection. And there's no reason you shouldn't think about treating some of those objects or documents with archival quality materials. And there are industry standards, of course. You would go to library school and get a degree in one of the many specialties within library sciences, like conservation. Some people choose archiving. So we're going to have a very, very quick overview of archiving tips. Hopefully, if there are any proper archivists in this meeting, you'll forgive me for how quickly I'm going to go over these things. But if you want more information, there's a ton available on the internet. You can start with the Library of Congress. They have great information about archiving. I'll also say that as with many things, as with the photo organizing, as with archiving, as with genealogy, you can do it yourself or you can hire someone. So archiving, as I was saying, is something that we don't think of as individuals in our own personal collection, but there's no reason not to. And you can choose to do it yourself, or you can choose to hire someone, as you can choose to hire people to organize your photos or people to do genealogy research for you. If you want to hire an archivist, unfortunately, our society doesn't really value archivists at a very high rate. So it's not super expensive to hire an archivist. You may be able to find a local archivist or a local librarian, a part-time librarian who can do it on the side for you. Maybe the HSP could recommend somebody. I know some people. So if it's something that interests you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Now, if you want to do it yourself, okay, wait, now I got to get my thing moving again here. Okay, if you want to do it yourself, here are some basic tips. So at the beginning of this program, I showed you a picture of archival boxes. Archival boxes are really expensive, as I said, so you want to make sure that you've curated your collection so that you're only preserving what you really want to make sure is kept. And where do you buy that stuff? There's a bunch of places to buy proper archival storage materials. One of them is, there's a bunch of others. These are the two that I use or that I'm familiar with. Gaylord.com and archivalmethods.com. And I'll tell you, they make a box and a folder and a tube and a whatever for everything. So it is a little overwhelming when you see the amount of things to choose from. But both of these groups are located in the United States. They're not massive companies. You can pick up the phone and call them and they will help you. They will answer your questions. They're nice people at both of these places. As far as the materials themselves, a couple quick things, basic things to do. The first one is newspaper clippings. Everybody has newspaper clippings and everybody has the same problem with newspaper clippings. They do not last. They turn yellow, they fritter away, some faster than others. And not only that, but they will damage whatever they're touching. So for instance, if you have a letter that's stapled to a newspaper clipping, you may notice that the letter has actually changed color where it's been in contact with the newspaper clipping. So if you want to keep the clipping, either put all the clippings together in a folder separate from everything else. Better yet, scan them or photocopy them onto archival paper. So that's what to do with newspaper clippings. You want to unfold things as much as possible when you put them in folders. And that's because the crease of the fold wears out every time you open and close that letter or whatever it is. So if you unfold it, it's better for the document. Get rid of all the metal and the plastic. So here I have a little picture of rusted paperclip, rusted staples, rusted little, it's a nail, but it's one of these little nails that holds papers together. First of all, these things probably damage the paper by making holes in them to begin with, but now it's going to leave a trace of rust. So just get rid of those in your materials. And people are tempted to use plastic paper clips instead, or rubber bands. Plastic and rubber bands don't last. Rubber bands are going to break, but they may also end up kind of glued onto one of your documents, which you don't want. If you're going to be very strict about things and a very good archivist, you would process your whole collection of photographs, for instance, with gloves on. These little cotton gloves that you can buy, they're not expensive. It prevents the natural oils on your skin from getting onto the papers or the photographs. It's very hard to get a fingerprint off a photograph. If you're not going to wear gloves, have a good hand wash before you get started on this stuff. And then in terms of storage, I know it sounds obvious, but archives like to be where we like to be. They like climate control. They don't want to be in the attic in the freezing winters and boiling summers. They don't really want to be in the basement in the damp. So once you figure out what category A is and you archive it, find a good storage space for it somewhere in your home that where it can and be within climate control. All right, here's just for fun. Somebody who attended this seminar a couple months ago sent me this. It's a newspaper clipping his mother saved, and you can see what happened. You can't read the clipping anymore, and she laminated it, and now the lamination's coming off. So just an illustration of the types of things that happen in our collections that, archiving for some people is a real drag. I think it's fun, but some people don't like to, but this is why we do it. We do it to preserve these materials so that it doesn't happen to them. All right. Digitizing, scanning, whatever you want to call it, is the process of getting that document or that photo or the video or cassette tape or whatever it is into a digital format that can live on your computer. And most modern home office printers have an automatic scanning function built in. It's not the best scanning in the world, but the newer the printer, the better the scanner is going to be. So if you are in the mood to scan your materials, you should absolutely give it a try on your home scanner. Try and select a high DPI, dots per inch, of the resolution at which it scans, like 300 or more. That would be great. But if you're not up for scanning yourself, there are a number of places in Philadelphia that will help you out. So one of the ones I like is the Photo Lounge. They just moved from 19th Street down to 17th Street. They were on Chestnut and 19th, now they're on 17th. And they actually have a door-to-door pickup and delivery service. So you can get all your stuff together, call them, they'll come pick it up, digitize it back at the shop, and then bring it back to you, which is a nice service. Oh, by the way, Photo Lounge and the other things I'm going to mention, all that stuff's in the handout, and I put a link to the handout in the chat. So if you don't have to take too many notes, I think. Anyway, so you can use a local shop like the Photo Lounge. There's some, if you have really big, precious, oversized things, the Athenaeum also has a whole suite of digitization offerings. And if you're more adventurous, you can send the stuff out. There are a number of services that you can find online. I like forever.com, where you send them the stuff, it gets FedEx to them, they scan it, and then they upload it to your Forever account and they send it back to you. Even some people choose to scan rather than to do the full archiving. They scan and they don't bother buying boxes. If you really want to do the full thing, you would scan and put everything in the proper storage boxes. But Many people just stop with the scanning, and don't beat yourself up for that. You're already doing a lot if you get everything scanned. Once it's scanned, do not store it just on your computer. The computer is not enough. I know, I've lost stuff on my computer before. I'm sure many of you have lost stuff on your computer before. Storing stuff locally on a computer, even a laptop, is not a long-term storage solution. Ideally, you would have 3 copies of the materials on external drives. So, one of these things like a thumb drive, or, you can't see it there, on a thumb drive, or an actual external hard drive. And you have 2 copies. So you can put one in your safe deposit box, or put one, with one of your children. Actually, you could make copies of this stuff for as many children as you have, and that way that's done. And then 1 copy in the cloud. So as I said, I like forever.com, but there are lots of clouds, and most of you probably already use them. Clouds like Dropbox or Google Drive or SmugMug, or Apple has a cloud too. So I'm not, again, I don't have an agenda to make you use forever.com or to use the other things I'm suggesting. This just happens to be my favorite. So there you go. That's what to do with, once it's all digitized, this is the best practice for how to ensure that you don't lose all that hard work you just put yourself through. All right. So that's it for archiving. Now, this is the last category that I get asked about, and we're going to have a quick overview of genealogy. For those of you who are genealogy buffs, maybe you'll learn something, maybe you won't, but hopefully this is still interesting information. Anyone who wants to start a genealogy project, I have 2 words of caution. And the first one is very well illustrated in this dish one of my clients gave me a couple of years ago. If you don't want to find the nuts in your family, it says, don't shake the tree. So this cracks me up. And what I'm really trying to say here is that if you don't want to find out that in your family history, you have cousins who got married or to each other, or that you have criminals in your ancestry, or you have, your great-grandfather had an illegitimate brother. If you don't want to find out these things, genealogy is not for you. It happens all the time. People lived different lives back then, and stuff happens. And if those things I just mentioned make you uncomfortable, think twice about genealogy. You can't unknow what you know. If you learn something and you wish you didn't know it, I don't know what to tell you. So I think that's fun. I think it's fun finding these things out. Not everybody does. The other thing I want to talk about briefly is privacy settings. So here's the screenshot for the tree settings on Ancestry.com. And again, I'm not advocating that you use Ancestry or not, but everyone knows about them, so I don't have to explain what it is. When you set up a tree on Ancestry.com, as with many of the websites like this, they're competitors of Ancestry, it defaults to a public tree. And so if this were a public tree, right here, this little button up here would be green, and it would show you it's a public tree. And the reason it defaults that way, and why it's so convenient to do that, is because that is one of the reasons that genealogy research has exploded in the last, whatever it is, 15, 20 years. It's because of this incredible information sharing that has been made possible on Ancestry.com and the other sites, so that you can see what other people are doing, learn from their research, and share your research too. It's been hugely beneficial for the field. But again, it's not for everybody. And I would say that even in a public tree, people who are alive should not be showing up. So if you're concerned about privacy about yourself or your kids, you should be okay there without having to change the settings. Now, if you don't want to have a public tree, you can have a private tree, which is at the bottom of the screen here with the little green radio button. And a private tree, what happens, let's say I'm doing a search for someone who's in your family, and I find your tree, except it says, oh, this tree is private. If you want to view it, you have to email the tree owner and ask them for permission. So that's a nice setting. But if you're even more conservative than that, you can check off this last little checkbox at the bottom, prevent your tree from being found in searches. And that means that if I search for your relative, I'll find information, but I won't even find out that you have a tree with that data. So again, these are very personal decisions. I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't have a public tree. It's just something to think about. The data sharing going on with genealogy research, it's mind-boggling how much information is out there about us. And this is why. So some people care, some people don't, just something to think about. All right, so if you want to do it yourself, that's great. If you want to hire somebody, here are some things to think about. I've seen people charge, $40, $50 an hour. I've seen genealogists charge $150 an hour. There's a big range. It depends on the specialty of the researcher, on the credentials, on the years of experience, things like this. So big range. Where can you find one? The HSP offers genealogy research services, so it's nice to support a local organization like that. However, you can also search for a genealogist at the Association of Professional Genealogists. They have a Find a Researcher tool, which you can select specialties. So if you want someone who speaks Italian, you can check that off, things like this. It's very convenient. And I think my friend Sydney Dixon said she would be on this call. Sydney, if you're here, she's a very well-respected local genealogist. If you're here, just put your information in the chat so people can have that if they want it. Okay, if you're going to do the research yourself, I just want to mention something called the genealogical proof standard. So this is a term that is very common for credentialed genealogists who do this professionally day in, day out. And it relates to the standards they have to meet, all the things they have to check out when they are verifying facts. And it's really important to make sure your facts are right, because there's nothing worse than getting the facts wrong and ending up researching someone or a branch of your family that's not actually your family, right? Especially with people with common names. Just because you find a document about someone with the name of your ancestor doesn't mean it's necessarily the right person. So the genealogical proof standard is the series of checks and balances that helps avoid those types of mistakes. If you want to know more about it, just Google it. There's a ton of information out there on that. I don't think for everyday genealogists you need to be that rigorous, but be careful. Make sure you're doing the research right, or you're just going to get frustrated because you're going to get confused with what you're finding out, and because there are mistakes. All right, here are the big four in the world of online genealogy research. Ancestry, as I mentioned. Family search. If you've never done research before, genealogy research before, I would start here. It's completely free. You have to set up an account, but they don't send you any spam. And they've got a lot of records. They're a great place to start. Find My Past and Find My Heritage are also big, effective, popular sites. I don't remember when I last checked the pricing. The pricing changes every so often, but it's really, this is the annual price they charge. But they also run sales and discounts and that sort of thing. So so this is if it's not perfectly accurate, it's pretty close to accurate. Now, one of the things that these guys have done very well is make us think that, one, genealogy is fun and easy and no problem. You can do it all online, lickety split in an afternoon. So that's wrong. Genealogy is actually, although it's fun, it's really hard. You can't do it all in an afternoon. And you're not going to find it all in the big four. They have a lot of stuff to go through. They add more all the time. You should definitely give them a check. Most of these, the Ancestry, Find My Past, and My Heritage offer free trials, so you can dip your toe in the water and during a free trial. But eventually, you are going to hit a wall within those databases. So what you need is then to go look at where else the data you need is hiding. And they have zillions of smaller databases. And this is just a question of being a researcher and finding the right database for you. And the data, these databases reflect all the different range of human composition, religion, ethnicity, nationality, regions. So if you're doing Jewish research, Jewish genealogy research, one of the biggies in that section is jewishgen.org. If you're Irish and you're doing Irish genealogy, one of them is irishgenealogy.ie. I'm listing out, two of the big smaller ones, but there are dozens, more than dozens. There's really a ton of these little guys. I recently discovered the Department of the Interior actually allows you to search for land grants back when there were pioneers going west and getting land. So for an amateur genealogist, it's hard to know all these things exist. Google is your friend. So if you're getting stuck, just Google it. You may find useful information. The other thing is that sooner or later, you're going to end up writing a letter to a little county courthouse in some rinky-dink little town in the middle of nowhere with a $7 check so that the person who works there like 2 days a week can photocopy the document you're interested in next time they're in the office. That is still a thing. It used to be the only way to do research, so not so much anymore, but it's still a thing. You're going to run into that at some point. All right, so I know I've given you a lot of information here. The thing we don't want to do next is fall into the rabbit hole of genealogy. Where to start? There are a couple really good, easy little tips to start with. And the first one's to start small. You know, if you say to yourself, oh, I'm going to do my side of the family and then my spouse's side of the family, I'll be done by the holidays. It'll be a great holiday gift. That's probably not realistic. Genealogy grows and grows and grows, and it gets more and more complex as you go. So just start small and start with what you know. Work your way backwards. So choose your dad's side and your dad's side. That's a small, nice place to start. And document what you know about that person before you get started. Write down where they were born, where they died, the dates, if you have them, their name, nicknames, any siblings that person had, what they did for a living, whatever you can remember about that person. Call your sister, call your brother, see if they can remember anything. And the reason you do that is partially because it grounds you in a data set to start. So the internet's going to throw so much at you. It's going to find so many documents and so many leads. And quickly you're going to start doubting yourself. Oh my gosh, was my grandpa's name really Peter? I mean, it just really starts making you scratch your head. And that's when you go down the rabbit hole. So it's a good practice to start with retrieving what's in your own memory and your own family's memory for genealogy research. And the other set of tips is really about just taking your time to make sure you're doing it right. Don't rush through this. It's fun, especially in the beginning when you're finding all these terrific nuggets of information about your family. You just want to keep going. You go, and it get excited. And but in fact, you really need to take the time to verify that the facts you're finding are accurate. As I said, if you're finding information that's not about your family, I'm not sure what the point of it is, right? So find a fact and verify it. So it's just like, the beauty of this information sharing on Ancestry and the other places. Let's say you start a tree and you find out that some distant cousin's already done all the research. Well, the initial reaction oftentimes is, oh, that's terrific. I don't need to do this anymore. This person's done it all. Well, they've done it all, but you don't know if it's right. So you have a decision to make. Are you going to verify the work they did, or are you just going to accept that what they did is accurate? The last kind of tip, which is not a very exciting one, but keep track of your sources. And if you plan to publish the citations too, but keep track of the sources. It's, again, the internet's going to throw so many images and pieces of data at you. You're going to see things that you're really interested in, and then you're going to click a couple times, move on, and then need to go back to that other piece, and now you can't remember where you saw it. So you have to look for it all over again. So you're doing research twice, and that's just, it's better to avoid that. You'll become less frustrated with the project, and keep it fun. If you're finding that you're getting frustrated, take a time out, go have a snack. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you forgot to eat dinner, turn off the computer, pick it up again tomorrow. I have a client sometimes who emails me in the middle of the night. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. All right. Here's an example I want to bring up on this trust but verify stuff, because I know I'm harping on it, but it's so critical to doing the research correctly. This is my father's grandmother, Mary Jane Mack. And by the way, this is a document I had to send a little check to some county courthouse up in upstate New York to get. And we talked, you'll remember when we were kids in school, we were talking about primary and secondary sources. Well, the death certificate, of course, is a primary source of information about the death information. We can trust that, this death date is accurate, and the name of the doctor and where she's buried, and that stuff, it's pretty sure that stuff is accurate. But everything here on the left, her date of birth, where she was born, the name of her father and mother, that's not a primary source, right? The person who filled this out is not the person who died. It's not the person it was happening to. It's someone else. And for me, this document was a huge breakthrough in my research, because I got the name of Mary Jane Mack's parents and where they were from in Ireland. So that was very exciting. But trust but verify. Now I have to go and make sure that this is accurate. I can't just assume that the person who filled it out got it right. Same thing for her date of birth, September 30, 1848. Can I trust that or not? Well, you want to trust it, right? But then 5 minutes later, I found her tombstone that says 1850 as the birth date. And I tell you, this is the kind of stuff that happens all the time in genealogy research. And this is part of the genealogical proof standard. You have to chase this stuff down if you want to do the research right. So that's what I did. I chased it down. I found everything that I could that had her date of birth on it. You know, probably she was born in 49, but there's some things we're never going to know. That's how it goes in genealogy. All right, so I wanted to end real quick on storytelling once more, but we've gone a pretty long time already. It's already 7:30, so I'll skip it actually, and just tell you this is myself and my dad, and there are a ton of stories in this picture, and I just encourage you to look at these pictures and get your stories out. So why don't we take some questions? Oh, right. So do I have to read them? Are you reading them, Chris? What are we doing?
Yeah, I will. We do have some here. So Janet says, I have several letters from the 1800s with fading ink or pencil. Is there a way to restore them?
So, so you guys don't do that, right, at the HSP?
We do not, no.
We do not, right. So there's a conservation center in Philadelphia up on, I don't know, I think up on 22nd Street or 23rd Street up there. They would be a good good organization to call and find out if they can do that and how much it costs. I mean, there's two parts, right, to this. There's the restoration of the document itself, and then there's keeping it from deteriorating further. So, but they would be the person to ask. I'm not a specialist in conservation and repair of documents, but I applaud your desire to want to deal with that, because those are the types of treasures that I think are really important.
Great. Yeah, and I can't think of the exact name, the Conservation Center for Arts and
Artifacts. No, what is it? I can look it up but
yeah, I've been there several times and I can't remember but yeah, it is down in Center City. I think it's the Conservation Center for Arts and Heritage, I believe.
Yes. Arts and Historic Artifacts.
And there we go. CCAHA. Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
And then we got another question. Brenda Harris says, how do you store obituaries? I'm guessing probably from a newspaper.
So if it's a newspaper clipping, I would be careful with the clipping. I mean, all this stuff really is personal decisions. If you're a trained archivist who went to library school, you're going to have a very high standard for how to deal with that clipping. And probably such a person will tell you to either scan it or photocopy it on archival quality paper so that you can preserve the article and not worry about the newspaper itself crumbling and frittering away. If you're like me, it may just be good enough to scan that. It may be good enough to photograph it. If it's a good photograph, you captured what you wanted, that may be enough. If it's online, then that's a whole nother thing.
And she says it's a original obituary pamphlet.
So it's a whole pamphlet. So there are appropriate storage boxes, archival storage boxes for and folders for things like diaries and journals and pamphlets and small books. So you can purchase that type. So if it's not an actual newspaper, that's a different type of issue or treatment, and you can buy special folders for that. But you may consider also scanning it. It depends if you want to do something with it or not, if you want to share the data. And that's the great thing about scanning it, right? Then you can share it easily. You can create a book. You can, send it to family and things like that.
Great. Rosemary has a question about family trees.
Okay.
She says, what does she name each tree branch? My last name and that of the branch hyphenated. There's a different tree for each branch starting with me. Is that correct?
Okay, so I don't know if Sydney's on the call right now. I'd love it if she chimed in. I do it in such a way that I can remember and work with. So the first thing is to pick a system and stick with it. If you're going to do a hyphenated situation, make sure you're doing that throughout the tree, so that you can keep track of who's on which side of the hyphen and what it represents. If there is an actual standard by which you're supposed to do that, according to the National Association of Genealogists, I won't know the answer to that. I do it, and I recommend to my clients to do it in such a way that it's meaningful to them. So, so yeah. Sorry, Rosemary.
No, that is helpful, you know, I know one of the things that because we've worked with Sydney also, and one of the things that she will tell you is, you know, the first thing you want to do is do it so that you'll be able to decipher it later.
Yes, if you can't figure it out in a year from now, there's a problem.
Right.
And the same with the way you organize your photos, the same with how you organize your documents. It's the same with, it's all of it. So, I mean, for files, I can tell you I like last name, comma, first name, and then whatever it is. So like Scouten, comma, Clémence, 1985 birthday party, right? So that if you're looking at file names, you can figure out what's in the picture without having to look at the picture. And same thing with documents that you may save. So Scouten, comma, Arthur, that was my dad, 1940 census. So you know what the document without having to open it. For the actual tree branches, it depends what you're doing with it too. If you're printing an oversized tree, you don't need it so much. If you're printing branches of the tree, you should be able to decipher that pretty quickly. So, yeah.
Great. Taylor says, I have handwritten letters my dad wrote home while serving in World War II that are
awesome.
that are in excellent shape. Some letters are multi-pages. Should I store the pages separately in plastic sleeves?
So there's specific plastic made for art. I mean, and plastic not the right term. In fact, I'm pretty sure that plastic is exactly not the term I should be using. But they make special sleeves for that sort of thing. But you can also, but a paper can touch each other. There's newspaper that's a real problem. It's that high acid content of the newspaper that attacks other things, other papers. But regular correspondence paper, or even those airmail envelopes that were really popular until the, I don't know, the mid 80s, those should be okay if they're touching each other. So you can put, like, you know, all the letters he wrote in August in one folder, all the letters he wrote in September in another folder. They should be okay that way. If you're using transparent sleeves to be able to view the letter, to be able to handle them without damaging them, then that's a different situation. But in that, I would recommend you scan them anyway. I would recommend you scan them and you put them in a book. I just did a book for someone who had letters from her dad from Vietnam, and we just scanned them, or organized them chronologically, scanned them, put them in a mixed book or a Snapfish or a Shutterfly, whatever you like to use. And we put a couple family pictures. She wrote an introduction, and then she made copies for her siblings. And I'll tell you, it's super meaningful. And then you don't have to worry so much about handling the letters themselves, which, you know, the more you touch them, the more you handle them, even if they're in these protective sleeves, the more wear and tear they're going to have.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, I know at HSP we'll call it, you know, we'll do that often if something, you know, is not in as great a shape or something. They call it a service copy. So, but that's great advice. And I did want to remind everybody, you know, we do have, you can type your questions in if you do, if you rather would want to ask your question in person. There is a little raise hand option at the bottom, and you can raise your hand. In fact, Irene has her hand up, so I think I'm going to unmute her for now. And let's see. Irene, can you hear us? Irene?
She is on mute.
Oh, you are
I'm sorry.
still. Whoop. Let's see if you can unmute now. Are you there?
Yeah, but I don't have a question. I think I had just raised my hand in response to something said earlier.
Oh, okay.
Something like, who has boxes of stuff out there?
Right. Okay.
Well, thank you for participating in my hand raising.
No problem. Thank you. Let's see. Peggy has a question. What is the best way to create a hard copy of all the information you have on Ancestry for family?
I'm sorry, what is the best way to what?
What is the best way to create a hard copy of the information you have on Ancestry for your family?
Okay, so what I like to do, that's what I call a family history book. So you download the all the documents you have, and you have to be real systematic about this. You just do one person at a time, one family group at a time. So you download the censuses, you download the ship manifests, you download, whatever the images, whatever you got. And then you once all that is done and the things are properly labeled, so whether it's this person's census or this person's census or whatever, then you choose an online book printer like blurb.com or mixbook.com or Shutterfly. I'm not a huge fan of Shutterfly, but whatever you're comfortable using. And then you can set up a book on one of these websites, and you upload all your images in there. And then now you can print these books and share them with family. And when you do that, you can also, add an introduction and add some text about, this branch of the family immigrated in this decade, and they were tailors, or this branch of the family was, first went to Chicago and then they came to Philadelphia. So it's nice to be able to add some narrative with the documents, because even though you've done all this research and people like me have done all this research, not everybody in the family wants to decipher all the ship manifests and all that, right? So you save them that work by writing a little blurb about the family, that branch in the book. So that is what I like to do. A lot of those places, I know blurb.com, you can purchase the ebook format. So you can set up the book on Blurb, and, if you want to print them, but you could also just keep electronic copies of the book and share them that way. I have not found a family tree software that really does what I want it to do. I like custom family trees. I want to be able to put the people on the tree that I want on the tree, not comply to the algorithm in the family tree software. So building family trees is kind of tedious to do it on your own, but I do it all the time. And you can do it in PowerPoint. PowerPoint is my favorite place to do it. And then you can just, I think you can save that to a JPEG. You can certainly save it to PDF and then upload it also into Blurb or wherever else. And then you can have a tree. So the beginning of each section of your book, that you write your introduction, but it's about 4 different branches of the family. Well, each of the section can now have a little tree for that branch. So that's how I would set that up. That would be the best way to share it. Now, if that's too much for you, then what I would do is take all those documents and put them in the cloud somewhere, whatever cloud you want, and then make those documents accessible to your family members. Just send them an email and say, if you care about all the research I've done, go here. And then, of course, you can share your ancestry tree, right? That's an option too. But it really depends what you're trying to accomplish. I like the family history books because, Ancestry, a lot of people use Ancestry as a storage device. They upload all these pictures into Ancestry. They upload all this information to Ancestry. And yes, Ancestry doesn't want to lose its data, and it doesn't want to, stop doing what it's doing, but it's not a storage center. That's not its mission. Its mission, first of all, is to make money. This is a big, big, big business. Ancestry.com is it's private equity. It's billions of dollars. And its mission is to get more people to do research and to upload documents and to do things like this. It's not meant to store your stuff. So long answer. I'm sorry. Hopefully I answered your question.
Great. Oh, thank you. Janine was asking, what are your recommendations for digitizing film and video from late 50s through the early 2000s?
I would call the photo lounge and ask them. I don't do digitization myself. You need so much equipment for the different types of tapes and 8mm versus VHS versus this versus that. It's a whole business in and unto itself. Call the photo lounge downtown, or they have there's a woman called Darla DeMauro out in Wayne, I think. So I don't know where you guys all are. She does a lot of digitizing. I don't think you can do those yourself. You can scan your documents yourself, your photos yourself, but when you get into transferring VHS tapes, slides, negatives, audio cassette tapes, old movies, that stuff you need specialized equipment. It's real hard to. Most people wouldn't invest the kind of money into that equipment to do it themselves.
Great, thank you. Colleen asks, what is a good resource for creating a hardcover book with pictures?
So I like blurb.com, blurb.com. But there's also mixbook.com. Those are the two that I tend to use the most. But, Shutterfly, Snapfish, there's a lot of them out there. The quality is, actually, I can't stand Snapfish, so I take it back. Don't use Snapfish. But they all function pretty much the same. They drag and drop. So you upload your pictures, you drag your pictures onto the page you want, and then you add some text boxes and some decorations on the pages. They all run sales routinely, so never buy full price on these websites. They will send you an email saying tomorrow 30%, tomorrow only 30% off. So if you're not in a hurry, if you're not on a deadline, wait for that email. But blurb.com and mixbook.com I like.
Great. And Myra mentions that she missed the first 10 minutes, but she has an uncle who's 91 years old and is a true storyteller. He goes from one family story to another and just to the other of his life experiences. Do you have tips on getting the best way to have him recorded? He lives outside Montgomery, Alabama. She said she knows about StoryCorps, but any other suggestions?
Well, there's a lot of opportunities. So it depends. It's, is this a do-it-yourself thing, or are you prepared to spend a little money? So if it's a do-it-yourself thing, you can organize a Zoom call with him. And if he has that competency level, or if he lives somewhere that somebody can sit him in front of a computer and whatever, because as as we're doing right now, it records both audio and video. You can do audio only on Zoom, I'm pretty sure, but you can also capture the video, so you can ask him questions. I have on my website, I think it's in the handout, I'm not sure, questions to ask your parents, and to get this kind of information out of there and out of them. And so you can do it on Zoom, you can do it on Skype, same concept. You can even do it over the phone, although that's a little trickier, I find. If you want to, so that's recorded. So that's your question, right? It's a face-to-face recording, like a StoryCorps. You're not interested in having him write something himself, it sounds like. Right, I'll just assume that's a no. Right. So yeah, prepare your questions, ask open-ended questions. So don't say, where did you go to school? Say, tell me a little bit about what school was like when you were growing up. And usually, after 2 or 3 questions, and it sounds like this gentleman is already a storyteller naturally, so he'll take over the conversation. But people usually find their stride. They usually get nervous like the first 2 or 3 questions, but then they loosen up, and then it's just blah, 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 blah. So that's what I would do. Get your questions prepared, ask open-ended questions, and then get on Skype or Zoom with him. If you want a free server that's going to do it for you, that's not StoryCorps, I don't really know. Maybe you could find a local high school that wants to do a research project or something.
Great. And just to add one little tidbit to that, if you can get him on Zoom, Zoom does also give you the option to just record it as an MP3. So if you just wanted to have just the audio and, you didn't want video for whatever reason, or you wanted just an audio to convert it to a CD or something like that, then, later on you could do it that way as well. I just know that from using Zoom and doing the recordings as we have.
It's nice that you can split it, right? It's nice that you can do audio only.
Yeah, exactly. We do have a question from Marilyn. She said, can you talk a little bit about archiving tintypes?
No, we've reached the limit of my knowledge on what, this is why people go to school for this, which I have not done. They really make a box and a storage container for everything. And so I'm sure there's the appropriate material in which to store the tintypes and whatever else you have. I just can't tell you exactly what it is. So maybe the HSP should have a whole class on archiving. That would be great. Or call gaylord.com and say, this is the material I have. What box should I buy? And they'll tell you. They're real friendly. And they'll know because they know, first of all, they're trained on this stuff, and then they know their own materials.
Great. Thank
But
you.
I would also suggest digitizing it before you store it.
Great.
Or not before you store it, but just along with the storage.
Beverly asked, do you work with people that get them started in organizing and helping begin beginning their writing as opposed to doing their whole project? So do you help them get started with it? Is that a service that you offer?
Sure. Usually with the writing, I'm essentially a memoir ghostwriter. So people usually hire me to help them write their whole memoir. I've never just gotten somebody started, but give me a call. I'm sure we can figure out something, or I can be some type of coach to keep you on track. I'd love to have that discussion. Yeah.
Great.
I see a question. Deborah's saying, who is the person in Wayne that I mentioned?
Oh, yeah.
Her name is Darla DeMorrow. DeMorrow. Darla DeMorrow. And she has a personal organizing business. She's called a photo organizer. There are people who do photo organizing, and photo organizers often are hooked up with the digitizing stuff.
And Mary asked if you could also repeat the book sites besides Shutterfly.
Absolutely. Blurb, B-L-U-R-B, blurb.com, and mixbook.com. I have links to them in my handout. So if you have my handout, it should be there, I'm pretty sure. Blurb and Mixbook. Those are the two that I turn to.
And then somebody also asked, are you able to touch on any of the various societies like the Mayflower, DAR, Dames and Barons of the Magna Carta? And what does it mean if a grandparent was a member?
Oh, so no, I'm not a specialist in those. If Bum Sydney's not here, I'm sure she would know the answer to that stuff. You apply to membership in these things based on your lineage, and their application is, their applications are rigorous and complicated, and not all the genealogists I know will even engage in preparing them. It's a specialty, so it's a whole thing. It's a topic of a whole nother program.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you're interested, call them and get, if you have a grandparent who was, whatever, one of those, or grandma who's a daughter of the American Revolution, call them and ask them for an application. They'll tell you. They want you. They just want to make sure that you qualify.
Yep. And no, that's great. And actually having, being at HSP, one of the things you also could do is places like HSP or even some of the local libraries may have membership books to a lot of these organizations. So unbeknownst to you, it could be that somebody 50 or 60, 70 years ago applied for this. And so I would also say to check, to either call them and see if they're on the register already, or to check with your library or historical society just to see, and the work may be done for you, which is good. I'm looking and see if we have any other questions here.
There's a question from Margaret about sharing data online. Was that the question you asked me and I answered it in the book format? I'm sorry if I mixed that up, but it's hard to share the information online. Mm-hmm. I haven't found a great genealogy tree building website that's sharing friendly, that isn't overly complicated. Mm-hmm. They're really hard to create on your own. And from scratch, like trying to do it on WordPress on your own is really, really hard. Mm-hmm. But if you actually created the tree on Ancestry or one of those other ones, even if you stop the membership, if you stop paying for it, they don't delete your tree. So your family can still access it. But it's funny. I did come across one the other day that I thought wasn't bad. So let me see if I can dig it up, and if I'll email it to Chris. And you can reach out to him and see if it's helpful. But send me your email, Margaret, and when I find it, I'll send it to you. But I just, on the top of my head, I don't have it because I never turn to those sites. I just don't find them useful. And a lot of them are real schlocky and not attractive, so I don't recommend them to clients anyway. I haven't found a sharp one. And part of it's because that they're competing with the Ancestries of the world, so it's hard. And you know, you're confined to how they want you to display the data, which isn't always how, you know, you want to display it. And that's why you're creating it on your own anyway.
Great. Yeah, no, and I do want to, because we're just about getting to the end of our time here.
Oh, sure.
But we did get it, you know, we got a lot of people saying thank you for the presentation. It was really great.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I love giving this presentation. And
Great.
It's real hard on Zoom because you can't hear anybody and see their faces. So thank you for saying you liked it.
It's tough. It is tough. And hopefully one day we'll all be back in, you know, be in person again. But I do also want to reiterate to everybody that, you know, we did record tonight, and what I'll do is I'll send out an email. Once I have that up, it takes me a day or two to get it up on our YouTube page and our website. But I'll send out an email to everybody with that link. I'll send out another link to your handout again, just to make sure everybody had it.
Oh, great. Thanks.
You know, and then I can also make sure they have your website and your phone number in case anybody wants to get in touch.
Yeah, and I'm always happy to answer questions. I mean, if I'm available, I'll take your call, answer your email. I can't answer every question you're going to have, but if I can answer it, I will help you.
Great. Well, again, I want to thank you, Clémence, and I also want to thank everybody tonight and for bearing with all the technical issues that we ran into.